I put a coil shock on a Ripmo AF. Here's what I thought about it. Guys, coil shocks are a bit of a rage right now. So let's talk about my first impressions when I started running Yonder coil on my Ibis Ripmo AF. Now I got this right out of the box with a 400-pound coil, and that is set for the DVO Jade rear shock. Now this was a little bit too soft for me, so I tried a 450-pound, eventually settled on a 500-pound coil. There's quite a bit of setup that we could talk about here, but my initial impressions were that, goodness, it is so much fun. The reasons why come down to, well, the feel. We talk about the feel of suspension so often, whether it's too stiff, too soft, too supple, too plush, too stiff, whatever it is. I said stiff twice because I hear that twice as often. And the coil shock feels absolutely incredible all throughout the travel. Now here's one of the big kickbacks on an air spring. As you compress it, it feels stiffer in the mid-stroke. So when you push into a corner and then you hit a bump in a corner, like we find on a bunch of trails because we're riding in the mountains and there are rocks and bumps and roots and things out there, as we're pushing into that corner, we're halfway through our air spring, it's super stiff, we hit the rock, we bounce off the rock, and we go, man, my suspension's crappy. With the coil, it feels super buttery all throughout the travel. Now that can pose some problems in frame design and in rider preference. For example, the original Ripmo wasn't built to run a coil. Because the coil doesn't have that ramp up progressivity in the suspension, the frame had to be designed to do that. The newest Ripmo AF and the new Gen 2 Ripmo do that, along with a lot of other bikes. If you're unsure if your bike is built to run a coil, ask the manufacturers, they can answer real quick, or just ask the old interweb. People have for sure asked that question already. But on my particular Ripmo, I really loved that coil feel because I loved how it felt glued to the ground. Now this isn't my jump off of everything party animal, so you're gonna feel a little bit more stability, a little bit more of a planted feel with most coil setups. That isn't true of everything. I can change some things on how the bike behaves to make it a little more lively and springy and poppy, as some of my buddies will say. But in this case, it felt incredibly planted, which I really enjoyed. I usually take this bike on rugged, rough, out there, loose, steep kind of terrain, particularly the stuff where, let me back up, I loved when I was going down something steep and I didn't have all the weight on my back wheel. I could still feel that rear suspension working, partly because a coil shock doesn't have as much initial breakthrough force to get the shock to move. Now it's a very minor little thing and you're not going to be taken aback, you're not going to be speechless because of how amazing it is, but it is a little thing to notice, and it does contribute to the overall ride characteristics of the bike. Furthermore, the coil isn't as adjustable. As I mentioned, I had to go through 3 different coils to find what I liked. These aren't the most expensive things ever, but it's more expensive than taking a couple minutes to just air up your air spring or your air shock. Most bikes will run an air shock because they are more adjustable. They are also a little bit lighter. Pick and choose, right? I really enjoyed the coil on this bike. If you have questions on any other ride impressions that I got, feel free to ask away. One other that I do want to cover that just came to mind was that the coil isn't as affected by temperature. When I took this bike to really cold areas, the air-powered front fork felt different. As it warmed up, as I got to lower elevations as well, it felt a little bit more normal. The rear suspension, the coil, felt the exact same at high elevation, cold temperatures as it did low elevation, warmer temperatures. It's pretty cool. Coil springs are pretty awesome. They're not for everybody, but for those who want them, for those who are going to appreciate them, for the kind of riding styles that need a coil, get on the coil life. It's pretty cool. Get out there, have some fun. Again, comment, like, subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time.